Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast and YouTube channel, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined by the totally unforeseeable aircraft malfunction post a failed coup, Connor. How you doing this evening, Connor?
I'm good, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it's just a lesson. You know, accidents happen, don't they? We've got to be careful.
For sure. Yeah, and it's always weird the timing of it as well. You know, you're there thinking you're doing a successful coup one day, the next day your aircraft's falling out of the sky, and that's just how aircraft safety works. Many years of success.
One of the unsafest ways to travel.
Exactly. Everyone always talks about just how unsafe aircraft are and how regularly they're falling out of the sky. So. That's probably slightly off topic, but interesting topical, I guess. So, have you been doing anything remotely related to Kill Team recently?
Yeah, well, I'm getting ready for Warhammer. So part of that training, obviously, I went down to Sutton and Ashfield with you. Finally met up with Jason.
Just to jump in, did you say you're getting ready for Warhammer? Aren't we all? Warhammer World.
That's what I said.
We're not going back to Age of Sigmar. That's not happening anytime soon. Guys, actually, we're going to rebrand ourselves. We're going to the old world. We thought Age of Sigmar would be the new thing.
Change the logos.
My jam. Sorry. You were saying you went to Sutton Ashfield.
Yeah. Finally, you were repping it so well, giving it such good advertising. I finally went down and met up with Jason. I'd like to point out, did not get my free chocolate that I was promised, but it wasn't a tournament, so...
It wasn't a tournament, but you did buy a giant chocolate brownie. So,
it was probably as big as my head.
If he had bought you chocolate, then you probably would get diabetes. If you got too much to the family, so you can't be handing that out.
If you like brownies and you like Kill Team, I think that's the place to go. It's a lovely venue. You get so much space, don't you?
They've got like a partnership with donuts, which a lot of people will be like, I don't really know what that is. But it's a Nottingham-based donut company that sell the most absurdly good baked goods, but they are unfortunately the size of your face. So it's probably 2,000 calories just looking at the donut without actually having it. So,
but Kill Team is such an intense sport. You do need the energy to get you through the day.
Well, you were sweating out, and you were playing pretty fast as well because you managed to get 3 games in an evening, right?
My mantra is over by turn 2, always, regardless. So that's why I managed to get 3 in.
You were playing some pretty speedy games.
Playing against Josh, and my plasma gunner just rolled 3 1s with no CP to spare. So he just evaporated himself with a clear eye on his Legion. It was fun. It was a nice mirror match game we were playing, actually. He played very well. I quite like. In fact, all my games.
How good did Josh's Night Lords look?
Oh my word, yeah, he's put some stunning effort into them.
Absolutely incredible. And if you want to check out Josh's stuff, it's at Joshua, which I think is probably linked in the description to this video. He does some incredible stuff. This is the weird thing about the Not to Kill Team group. They're getting actually really competitive and very good at the game, which is quite terrifying because it's like every time you go there, it gets harder and harder against everyone you play. And B, they are also some of the most talented painters, artists, and kit bashers that you'll see. And that would be fine, right? If they were just dicks and you didn't like them, and it was like, okay, so you're good at the game and you're good at painting, but they're also exceptionally nice people. So I haven't figured out yet what's wrong with them. But there's going to be something.
There's a cult. Something's going on there.
Figured it out. Yeah, they're also sacrificing babies. I don't know what it is, but there's something happening there. There's
something in the donuts we don't want to know about.
yeah, exactly. But no, Jason's doing an absolutely incredible job. I think it's now. I want to say over sort of 50 people in the group. Maybe it might be up to 60 actually. And we're regularly getting, in excess of 10 people on a club night. And there's an ongoing league as well, which is just awesome. So, but yeah, so obviously you got Warhammer World coming up, which is the golden ticket event, which sold surprisingly little tickets, which I think is a combination of reasons why, it's summer holidays for one. Number 2 is we didn't have a great time in the meta, and there was quite a bit of negativity around it. So when you're looking at signing up, you think to yourself, do I want to do 2 days of fighting Chaos Cults? Everyone was like, probably not. Which is interesting because I was already geared and ready to go. So I've been prepping with my exaction squad because I sort of went, this will be for the lulz, I can't win it anyway. and then boom, balanced data slate. So here we are. So we've been mixing it up a little bit, haven't we, Connor? We've been doing a few practice games, trying to get ready for it, and we'll see how it goes, I guess. But do you feel relatively ready?
Well, as ready as I can be. I think I am going to lean into Legionary. I was toying with the idea of Pathfinders, but I think for a 2-day event, it's gonna be very long, and I do just enjoy playing Legionary, as I said. To relax into it and just have a fun time, I think I'll play Legionary because I'm very rusty with Pathfinders, and there's a lot to learn, and then more to learn with the data slate. It's just too much of a learning curve in too short a space of time.
Yeah, you haven't played in a little while, and I think trying to pick up all of like Pathfinder's synergies and stuff. We do say that they're not an easy team to play, and there should hopefully be Into the Dark there as well. But the maps might be familiar to you, right? Like they might be familiar. This is pretty cool. So, Warhammer World Events team reached out to me and said, "Oh, hey, would it be possible for us to use Turning Point Tactics map pack for both Octarius, Nakmund, Morok, and Chalnath?" So hopefully we'll see if it actually comes off. But hopefully when we go there, a lot of people will see that actually these maps are the layouts that we've made, which is, I think, for me, unbelievably cool. Like
It's
it means
pretty awesome, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and I think this once again, like, I think Warhammer Fest, and I think this is the other reason why I think Warhammer World didn't sell too many tickets. I don't think Warhammer Fest quite hit the nail on the head, and a lot of people were left a little bit, I don't know, disappointed. You know, like that there was some issues in the way pairings were done, the train layouts, the last minute changes, etc., etc. But as far as I'm aware, I might be wrong, the Warhammer World Events team and the people who ran Warhammer Fest are two different entities altogether. And I'm guessing, don't have the same logistical issues that the Warhammer Fest guys had, right? So they're not flying across the Atlantic. They're not having to try and set up 120 tables or blah, blah, blah. And have a giant 40k tournament on the same day that absolutely dwarfs your event. So, but the guys at Warhammer World Events team, I've always thought of generally nailed it when it comes to their events. I've never had a bad event there. I don't know, maybe someone else has, but from my point of view, they've always been like exceptionally good at, you know, hosting. The terrain's fantastic. The environment you're in is fantastic. And so I'm actually buzzing for this weekend. I think it's going to be amazing fun. I think there's going to be some really stiff competition. I think I'll do okay. I don't think I'm going to win. I'm aiming for like 5-1. That'd be quite nice if I can walk away with a single loss.
That's a good shot.
You know, I'll be happy with 4-2. I'd be really happy if I get 5-1. If I manage to go undefeated, I'd be absolutely ecstatic. But I think there's going to be so many good players there that actually it's going to be really, really tough to achieve that. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I'm really excited. So it's so cool that they're doing that. And they're listening to the community as well, because I think a lot of people gave the feedback that they really wanted to be able to use doors on Octarius, because that's what like 99% of tournaments
they're on
use.
The model. They're on. You can see the door.
Exactly. Like if you look at it, you go, "Oh, that's a door," and it's like, "Yeah, you can't use it." Though it's like, "Oh, right," but if I'm playing Chalnath, I can. Yes. Oh, right. If I'm playing Morok, no, you can't use it again. It's like, oh, right. And I think people like that consistency of, if you see a door in the model, you can use a door in the model, which I'm hoping is going to be really good. Because I was a little bit worried when they messaged me. I was like, oh, are they going to? Because I've designed all the maps to have doors, and I was like, oh, what if they use all the maps that are supposed to have doors and don't have doors on them? But they haven't done that. Well, the email that came out says they haven't done that.
Fair play to them.
Obviously, they're a massive company, and if they decide on the day that they don't want to use my map pack, that's absolutely their choice. But to be honest, it's a massive win for me, and something that's really, really cool just to see them being used on the day if they do get used. And that's kind of like a massive tick in the box of a small competitive kill team channel, being recognised by this massive entity that is Games Workshop is awesome. So that's pretty cool.
Part of the objectives of starting this up was to improve the community. So that's awesome, isn't it? There is one drawback I can think of though. We have now lost an excuse when we lose a game. We're left with the dice and naturally that we're bad players. So I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, I took my Galapox. I couldn't get through this terrain.
Who built these maps? God's sake.
Well, this is the thing, right? It's like we are opening ourselves up a little bit because if people come back and they go, "Yeah, I went to Warhammer World and the maps were absolutely terrible," then it'll be like, "Oh, that's a bit awkward. That was on me. My bad, guys."
Oops.
But I'm hopeful that they won't be like that. I think people. I think
they're balanced. As much as you can balance them with such a complex game, I think they are balanced.
Yeah. So, for instance, I think commandos are quite strong on the TBT maps. I think the way that the maps have been built, they're just generically quite good. But I think one of the things that might catch a lot of commando players out is I think we're going to see a bit of a resurgence of elites, because elites kind of went off the menu with, Inquisition coming out and Chaos Cults being so strong, and now suddenly those teams have gone away. I think maybe you might see quite a few Legionary players, quite a few Intercession players, and those Commando guys that are trying to hop on the Commando bandwagon might get stung by it, because those teams can really mess you up. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what people go with, and what teams they take, and how they play it out, because obviously this is kind of like the tournament that people actually are playing to win. And it'd be disingenuous of me to say that I haven't been this for me is a tournament I'm coming to win, right? Like I am bringing my A game. I say that, although I have just spent the last 2 months practicing with the wrong team, but it's fine. Like I'm bringing my A game,
B game.
I'm bringing my B game. I've done at least 4 practice games, and I'm going to see how it goes. But I'm definitely playing to win, right? Whereas a few of the tournaments I've gone to recently, I've not invested that much. I've been like, okay, I'm going to turn up and just see what happens, because I sort of already knew that a Colts player or someone else was probably going to win. Whereas now I'm like, all right, this is the one. The meta seems pretty balanced. There's some big boogeymen out there for sure, but I'm excited. I'm excited to see how it goes, and I think the Nottingham scene are bringing at least 10 players, like maybe more. Turning Point Tactics are bringing at least 5. I want to say. And the London scene are bringing probably at least 10. So I think I'm going to know over half the field personally before I get there. Which
no Spaniards. Normally the Spaniards come and steal all our trophies. So
I'm sure there'll be some Spaniards there. I don't know for definite, but probably, right. Or they might be a little bit annoyed about the Warhammer Fest experience, which is a massive shame, because it genuinely Warhammer World and the events they do historically have been amazing, and I fully think this weekend is going to be absolutely fantastic and phenomenal. And the only I was going to say any people that challenge them, but London's pretty good as well. But the next best thing, which actually, I'm gonna be controversial. I actually think that Sanctuary, Jason, I think his tournaments are the best competitive experiences. And the reason why I say that
is chocolate.
It was the free chocolate. No, but but the reason I was going to say it is because he managed to set up for his 32 player tournament 16 into the dartboards and 16 open boards. So every single player had like almost like a 40k boards worth of space, right? Like that's how much space you had in Sanctuary, because the store was really good for support. And then you could just like, you played 2 rounds on open board and then you seamlessly moved into dark. And that, I think, was like because the other way of doing mixed is just random selection, right? You just play each round and you turn up at a table and it's either one of the maps, which is what I assume they're going to do for this at Warhammer World. Might be wrong, but like, yeah, deployment zones marked out, objectives on the table, terrain set up. Like, he was also using TPT map packs, so I was saying slightly biased, good map pack. But yeah, so that was incredible. So I'm hoping that Warhammer World is going to be like that this weekend. I'm super excited for it. It should be a great laugh, So I'm looking forward to that. And speaking of tournaments, we do have to make one quite large shout out, which is on the 25th and 26th of November. Everyone listening needs to pencil into their diary and say London Dark Sphere tournament hosted by Turning Point Tactics.
Woo.
It's going to be 64 players. This is the aspiration. 64 players. I want to max it out. I want to see as many people from as many different communities as possible. So I know we've got like Gin Sheep from the southwest. I want him to come along. I know we've got like the guys from Portsmouth, the Notts guys, the Manchester crowd, the Polish guys, the German guys, like whoever you are, like turn up. I want to see maximum representation. That'd be absolutely epic. And hopefully we'll have a great 2 days. The Friday night beforehand will be like a casual event. If people want to turn up, you can just book tables at Dark Sphere. They're open till 11 p.m. So if you're arriving for the full weekend, you can turn up on the Friday. You can play some practice games. I'm hoping we'll be able to get in there and we'll do probably a little patron event as well. And we'll do like a little bit of coaching, a little like kind of thing prior to the tournament. And then boom, straight into 2 days of tournament. The day one is a open tournament for everyone, and then day 2 will be a top 16 cut. So like the best of the players can then fight out to see who gets the first place, or first, second, third. But then there'll also be on day 2 a second tournament, which means that you have another opportunity to win if you don't quite make it into that top 16, and you can go for that one as well. And you can buy each day individually. So if you know you don't want to make it for both, or you can't make it for both, you could just buy the Saturday or the Sunday, and you can turn up to each of those tournaments and you have some great fun. So we've tried to make it as accessible to everyone, because if you're traveling a long way, you don't want to just travel for a day, right? You want to travel for a full weekend. If you're just traveling across London, you might just want to do 1 day, or et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hoping it's going to hit all of those individual elements. I'm going to reach out to a bunch of content creators to see if they can come and support, because it'd be so epic to be able to see that. I imagine they will, and I'm really hoping we can make it an epic event. I'm trying to get as much prize support as possible. I don't want to make any money off of it. If anything, I'll run the event at a loss. That'd be epic, just so that people have the most fun possible, and we get as many people raving about Kill Team as we can. That'd be epic. So 25th and 26th of November, those are the dates. And the Friday immediately prior, we will have a little casual evening, playing some games, throwing some dice as a bit of a warm-up, setting up some boards, maybe a little patron thing. We'll see how it goes. But for anyone that's making the commitment, going long distance, maybe you're traveling from France, traveling from Germany, traveling from wherever. I keep choosing those 2 places, but I think it's because I'm talking to people from those areas. But yeah, it should be really, really epic. So we'll see how it goes.
You'd be gutted, wouldn't you, if you got top 16 on the Saturday and you hadn't bought your Sunday ticket? Cool.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? Is that I know that some people aren't going to be able to attend, and I think the easiest way that we're going to skin that is, let's say that you get whatever, you're in the top 16, but you can't make the Sunday for whatever reason. Then we'll just say, okay, no worries. Number 17 takes your place. And if number 17 can't do it, number 18 does, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll work our way down so that the players that can make it will go, and the players that can't can sit out. Because I do understand this is just a hobby, and people have a balance, and there's a certain amount some people want to commit and necessarily don't want to commit all of it. So you can still do really well in the tournament, on day one and see where you end up. And then there'll be that cut for day two. So you have double opportunities to win and all that sort of stuff. And I'm trying to do, I said, as many awards as possible. I want to do best in faction, but like for Chaos, for Eldari, for Xenos, and for Imperium. So
Eldari are Xenos.
Well, true, but like I just want to give more awards out, right? So it's a slightly easier field, I guess. You're only playing against Hand of the Archon, Corsairs, and Harlequin players. But I think it'd be awesome. And Compendium, obviously, Craft Worlds. Let's not forget Craft Worlds. But then also, like, if it's your first tournament, we'll try and do an award for that as well, for like whoever does the best at their first tournament. So if you're turning up and you're a brand new beginner, that's absolutely chill. You can turn up, have fun. There's a chance you'll walk away with prizes. So
what about best painted terrain?
The store is going to provide the terrain.
Oh, okay.
So which is massive, because that's actually like pretty good. But 100% there'll be a best painted. And there'll be a most sportsmanship or most sportsmanlike trophy as well, and all that sort of stuff. So that's the plan. I want it to be as epic as possible, and we'll see what we can do. Because I think that's post Warhammer, the golden ticket Warhammer World Championships. So hopefully everyone will be on a massive high post that. They'll all be super keen on Kill Team. We're going into the winter months, and people want to be getting ready for Christmas and all that sort of stuff. And what better way than playing a bit of Kill Team with your friends? So 25th and 26th of November is the dates for that. Okay, Connor. I think that's all the sort of intro stuff to talk through. But if people are listening and they think, hey, I really want to support this podcast, I like what I'm listening, and I'm potentially want to get a bit more out of it. Is there any way that they could support this?
Yeah, absolutely as well. Obviously, first and foremost, pencil that date, 25th, 26th of November, into your diary. Come on down, let's meet up. But obviously, if you can't do that, then you could join our Patreon for as little as £3 a month. £3 a month would get us a pint at Bubman's Bar at Warhammer World coming up. But what would that get you? Well, that would get you early access to all of our videos, as well as some exclusive Patreon-only content. We've got things on there. We've got bat reps. We've got guides. We've got memes now. We've got loads of awesome hobby images, and just a fantastic community that's being built up on the Discord there. You could also subscribe to our YouTube channel and share our videos with as many people as possible. We obviously want to try and get the message out there that Kill Team is a phenomenal, fun game and dethrone 40k. So maybe some salty Death Guard players that aren't really happy with how their team's performing in 40k. Let them know that they could use their Death Guard models in Kill Team, and they're still quite good in Compendium, and they could be Nurgle Legionary and be even better. So get the word out there, share our videos with all your friends. Or if you're thinking about buying some models, then if you buy them through Element Games, they offer a 15% discount, and use our affiliate link below in the description when you buy it, then that's another way you can support the podcast at the same time.
So I have one terrible bit of really bad news for you, is that I don't think it's going to be £3 for a pint at Bugman's Bar.
Oh my god!
Those fees are so gone. Like, you go into London now, and it's like £7.50 for a pint or something, and it's like, oh great. It's really sad when you hand someone a fiver and
they want more.
And they want more. And you're like, sorry, what? Like, when does this become a thing? I'm not even that old, but I remember when pints were, £3, whatever. And now, geez, yeah. I think also, to be fair, I had maybe some bias, because in the military bars are always like cost price
subsidized.
So you go, oh, gin and tonic, what's that, like £2? And then suddenly you go, oh, I'm going to have a gin and tonic, and it's like, oh, what's that? It's like £12.50. It's like, holy!
I don't want to buy the whole bar. What are you saying?
I've just heard that someone outside is, I want to say, like drilling, or I think sawing wood, which is
well,
hopefully you can you hear that?
It's the best time to do it.
Like,
No, I can't hear it.
okay, that's good. I hope it's not going to ruin everyone's audio experience. But quarter past 9. I'm going to start doing some woodscraft and like.
It has been a warm day. Maybe they're waiting for it to cool down.
To be fair, it has been very warm. But I'm in like a new house, everyone knows, and it's a new build, and loads of people have been moving in recently, so they're probably doing some essential DIY on their property. I won't judge them, but it is amusing when it's like 9:15 at night, you just hear someone taking out the circular saw to start cutting wood. Why can't you think of a normal hobby like painting miniatures like everyone else does? There's no noise in that.
The spray can. The rattle, well, you wouldn't know that, obviously.
Yeah, rattle can, I guess. They probably think it's weirder. Okay, so I think that's all that sort of good stuff. Should we go into the sort of the Patreon priority questions and all the stuff that those guys have asked for, so we can start covering those topics?
Absolutely, yeah, let's do it. Okay, first question. How to beat Galapox?
It's a nice, easy question. I like that. But actually somewhat complicated. So the reason why this is kind of reads across to all melee teams, but the reason why Galapox is so different is because they are effectively an entirely melee team, right? And I know they have Volgar with his massive flamer, but they're essentially an entirely melee team, and they have a few frag grenades. Well, the frag grenades, they don't care about your order, right? So you're only really worried about Volgar when it comes to shooting, which then means that you have to play the game very, very differently, because they're effectively a damage check army, right? So they're looking to see how much damage output you can muster, and the question is can you do enough to stop them from effectively swarming all the points and objectives, bogging you down, and stopping you from being able to do what you want to do, which is score points. So you want to go almost, I would say, entirely engage, which is contradictory to what you would normally do in every other game. And I think you can see when people are going to be struggling versus Galapox is when on turn 1, they have loads of their models on conceal, and they miss out on opportunities to put out damage, right? So if you have guys that have grenades yourself, you want them on engage, right? So any of their models that they push too far up, you want to punish. You want to make sure that you have like use of vantage points. Now you can't kill the glitchlings because they have super conceal, but you can make it harder for the mutants and the other bugs and all that sort of stuff. And you just want to try and like remove as many of their models as possible as early as possible, or at least force them to be more respectful and stay further back, right? Because they're a melee army. They have to get into melee range with you. And therefore, if you can keep them outside of that distance, you're going to have more success. You get more time to try and kill them. And another thing that's going to help you with that is use of barricades, right? So we've done our barricade guide. And I think actually I might do a bit more on this. I might do a new barricade guide because I'm learning new things with them every time I use them at the moment. But effectively, you want to try and force it so that your barricade placement is making it harder for them to get to where they need to get and harder for them to reach you. And if you can do that, you're onto a winner, and you can sort of like start holding them back. Now, I think the next thing is I want to say the Hulks are a bit of a distraction, right? They are scary because they're massive and they're killy, but realistically, they only ever kill like 2 models a turn, and I think it's with CP, right? So like most of the time, they're only killing 1 model a turn, and you can definitely like make it harder for them to kill more than 1 model a turn with effective spacing. So if you make sure that they can only ever charge 1 person at a time, or you use barricades so you can be 1 inch back, then sure, they can spend a CP to go over your base and bars through and try and find room and all that sort of stuff. Absolutely, they can do that. But now they're still doing it in a way which is only ever killing 1 person, right? So, and they're spending CP, which is what you want them to do. So if you can try and like limit how many they can kill with the big guys and focus on killing everything else, then on any action-based primary, they become screwed, right? Because the big guys take 2 APLs to do an action. If they're doing that, they're not killing you. So fundamentally, the quicker you can kill their mission monkeys, then the quicker you neuter their team of points, and that's really, really important. So I would say you definitely want to look at that. So on control, on capture, it is a bit different because they can just walk on it. But fundamentally, that's a good way of doing it. I think also there's an element of APL manipulation with that team. So a few things: if you have access to stun, that's epic. If you can just hand out -1 APL, that's really, really good. Or if you have an ability that maybe makes them add 1 to mission actions, that's also fantastic, right? So you want to look at using those abilities, and you want to use those abilities probably on the big boys, right? So let's say that, the add 1 to mission actions is against the mutants and glitchlings, but other than that, the other two, stun and -1 APL on the big boys. So let's say you're like Pathfinders, handing out -1 APL to one of the big Nightmare Hulks. Boom, suddenly he's killing no one that turn, right? Or he's spending a CP to kill one person. Or let's say you're Breachers and you have the skull. Again, -1 APL against a big dude. Perfect. Or if you're Void Dancers and you have the Prismatic Grenade and you can get it into a group of the big guys and you've got a reroll. 5 dice looking for a 6. Perfecto, right? Trying to get that stun just to force them to be less effective on the turns which they want to be. And if you can ideally do that against ones that have already activated in Turning Point 1, then that forces them to be ineffective for 2 turning points, and that's half the game, right? Like, you've removed the effectiveness of the model for half the game. That's massive. So really look to see what you can do with that. And then with the mission actions, like they're a 2 APL team, right? Like if you can just add 1 to mission actions, then all of their models are suddenly just sat there, and all they already have to be on the objective to be able to do anything with the objective if you're playing loot or secure. So that's massive, right? And they also want to do the what's their taint one called? Their tack up, which is like tainting the objective. They want to try and do that as well, but I'm pretty sure that's a mission action. And if it is, adding 1 to it, oof, that really, really hurts. The final thing I say is if you have any like -1 APL to objective control, like let's say you're Phobos and you have Terror, or Exaction Squad have the Nuncio Aquila, and there's other options, I'm sure. Or maybe you have +1 yourself to objective control, you have a banner or something like that. Well, again, the fact that they're only 2 APL means that you can really bully them on objectives by using those sorts of abilities, right? And that's where you win against Galapox, is I don't think you focus on tabling them. You focus on doing as much like objective damage to them as possible so they can't get run away on points. And I think that's the main methods that I would say to use. So to summarize, go fully engage, put as much damage out there as you can with your blast weapons and your range weapons, and using Vantage to deny them taking distance on the board, and indirect if you're on like Into the Dark or something, although it's less range, but it's still good range, right? Use your barricades effectively. Make sure you use the stun and the APL, and you play around that mission that you're playing, and be that mission control or APL manipulation, and then use your spacing to deny charging and double kills, or like block routes with someone on a doorway or in a certain position so that they're forced to spend CP of barge, etc., and they're not getting quite as much damage as they'd want to. I think that's really, to me, the key to success to beating Galapox is focusing on that, like not worrying too much about these Nightmare Hulks and sinking entire turns of shooting into them where you're not actually achieving anything, but focusing on the mission that you're actually trying to do. What do you think about that, Connor? Do you agree, disagree?
I agree. I think you've nailed it. Let's move on. Next question. How does your TAC-op and kill team selection change when on open versus ITD? Are there some things that you should prioritize more?
Yes, this is a great question, right? Because there are quite a lot of key differences between the two. So, everyone knows that in ITD, mission actions are actually quite a lot more important because, right, realistically, you need to get through these doors. And turn 1, you can open them all up if you want to, but that might mean that your opponent has easier access to your models, and you don't necessarily want to do that. So if you have a free mission action, suddenly you can open doors and you can move through to objectives. But also on turn one, it might let you actually get to some objectives, because some of the maps you need those mission actions to be able to get through the doors and then get to the objective. So mission actions are really, really important. So in kill team selection, I think you need to look at that. So what methods do you have of achieving this? And when I say kill team selection, I mean like actually choosing which kill team to use, as well as which models to bring right within your kill team, because some kill teams don't have any access to these things and they really, really struggle, but some do. So Pathfinders recently have just got a buff to get basically a whole bunch of free mission actions. It used to just be their Shaz Wee. So now it's like, okay, actually, I can predict what I want to be able to do and use Core Yon when I need to be able to use those mission actions, and that's going to affect how I play them in ITD. But pre that, you might go, with only the Shaz Wee having the free mission actions, this is going to be really hard to do, and I'm not going to risk it. So look at that. And if you have a certain model that can do that, or a certain bit of equipment, whatever it is, then look at probably taking it. It has significantly increased value in ITD. But when it... So when it then comes to TAC op selection, and let's stick on kill team selection whilst we're here, I guess. So there's a few other things that I think are important. Long range has less validity, but it's still useful. Don't get me wrong, but it has less validity in ITD. It's less important, right? So having it is really nice because you can do some cool stuff with guard, or you can stop people from just holding angles really far back and all that sort of stuff. But when you start getting to like the advanced play in ITD, you'll find that a lot of people, unless you have ignore obscurity, all of their guard moves that you care about are going to be obscured anyway, right? So they're not going to give you a free shot with a plasma cannon or plasma gun, whatever, turn one. So instead, you might start thinking about, you know what I actually need is a bit more mobile killing potential. So having heavy is actually very, very restrictive. So let's take breaches, for example. You know, I could take a las volley, but unless I know exactly which room I'm going to put it in, and I know that they've got long sight lines, it might be a massive waste, right? So if I know I have to be moving up to get within 2 inches of people, then suddenly this trading game doesn't work. So look for that in your team as well. Now, talking about TAC ops. So TAC ops, there is quite a lot of changes. So the first thing is just like understanding that your opponent's board edge and drop zone is actually a lot harder to get to, right? So like you have a lot further to go to achieve that objective on most maps, because also a lot of secondaries are tied to kill zone edge, or board edge, which means it's not their deployment zone, which is like the whole square forwards, but it's right at the back. So you actually sometimes have to be beyond the furthest heavy wall that there is in ITD, and you're going to have to get through at least 2 doors to get there. So you got to take into consideration how far you're moving. So let's say you're playing Hearthkin, and you're looking at something that's get basically across the board all the way to where your opponent is. Well, that's going to be so hard to do, right? Because you've got to move through doorways, you have limited routes, you've got to try and get that distance, and suddenly you've got to. So it's tough, right? So maybe look at other options that you have rather than those sorts of secondaries. I think it's also worth noting that on ITD, generically, Turning Point 1 is pretty much a wasted turn for scoring TAC ops, right? Like, there are very few TAC ops you can score Turning Point 1 in ITD. I think you can maybe do recover item, but it can be quite easy to contest with a lot of teams. But generically, TP1 is wasted. So if you're looking at like, oh, can I run a team that's going to run away on the points really early? It's hard to do that on ITD, on Turning Point 1 at least. The other thing I'd say about ITD is the way that the maps are built generically is it can sometimes be really hard to reposition models effectively, right? So, and this has advantages and disadvantages, right? So, like, let's say you're playing security, all right, and you think to yourself, okay, I'm playing security and I want to take like C's hatchway or something like that, C's access point, sorry, or I'm playing escort operative, or whatever it's going to be, right? I think you have to look at it in a sense of, okay, what area of the board am I happy to just stall on, like commit minimum resources to, and what side of the board am I going to like steamroll and force a significant advantage in it. And so I think we were talking about in the Discord the other day, the idea of a failed flank or I guess a false flank. So trying to see like, can I just commit, let's say, like 2 or 3 models to that flank, just enough to get the objective on turn 1, turn 2. So I'm not going down on points, right? Like I want to maintain at least 3 points on turning point 1 and turning point 2. But on turn points 3 and 4, I'm happy to lose that flank. I genuinely don't care. They can have it, over to them, right? Because on the opposite flank, I'm going to make a significant amount of ground. I'm going to start taking primaries from them on that flank, and that's where I'm going to be scoring my secondaries as well. And that's something that I would say to try and look at. So I guess the main points that I'm going to come away from this is, don't underestimate the value of those free mission actions, especially if you're on an action-based primary. That becomes so important. Don't underestimate how far you need to go to get to your opponent's drop zone or board edge, right? Like, you need to be moving up the board on turn 2 so that your turn 3 move is sufficiently far enough that you can make it there on turn 4, right? So like turn 1, fine, whatever, but like you need to keep forward momentum, and if you don't, you're going to lose points. And then potentially look at that, where can I afford to commit models, and where can I afford to just stall? Do I need to actually fully commit stuff here? And can I just go, actually, I'm going to throw the majority of my weight at this flank over here. And on quite a lot of the ITD maps, you'll see that there's like a route to the central room. So if you overcommit too much on say the right flank, you can get back into the center, but there's no way your guys on the right flank are going to get to the left flank. All right. So look at that and try and figure it out. But you can usually overwhelm on a certain area. So I guess like that was kind of like I it's very hard for me to answer it directly in a sense of, what tactics am I going to take? Because I think it's so dependent on what your opponent plays. It's so dependent on the team that you're bringing. And when it comes to kill team selection, it's so matchup based, right? And that's kind of the beauty of kill team, but also difficulty is I can't just give you you just take these 3 tac ops and you take this operative every time because that's the answer. But I think generically, the main things that I would say is you want to try and look at tac ops that if you can play the mid board really well and you can sit in the mid board, that's great. If you can stall and you can just hide behind doors and still score your tac ops, that's great. And I think if you are committing to a tac op or an archetype that requires a lot of forward momentum, then really look at like overwhelming the flank that you need to achieve it, and try to make back your primaries in the air in taking away your opponent's primaries on that flank as well. And then just see how much you can stall on the opposite flank is probably how I'd try and run that. But any thoughts, Connor, from your experience on ITD of how your tac op selection changes or anything like that?
Well, just one thing from my experience is oh my god, Blast can be amazing on ITD. Just particularly, I'm thinking from the Sorcerer, and there's also ITD is probably the one scenario where I'm thinking, do you know what, with Legionary, I might even take the missile launcher just to really muck about and get in the head of my opponent as they worry about all that blast. But I wanted to expand, if we could, on your tac op idea. I understand why you don't want to give something concrete, because it is hard to be, when we're speaking so broadly. But do you think the tier list for the tac ops changes between ITD and open board? By which I mean, do you think that maybe Recon might be the strongest pack to select on open board, but maybe it's like second or third actually on ITD? So for those teams that have got like 4 or so like archetypes they could pick from, is that when you're like changing it around?
Yeah, that is a fantastic point. You know what? I think there's some merit to that. There genuinely is. I would need to do a little bit more thought on it. But I think you're right. I think Seek and Destroy is probably better on ITD.
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons why, right? Like, let's say you're doing Rob and Ransack. Normally, what you're worried about on open board when you're playing Rob and Ransack is that you kill a guy, and then that model that you've used to kill them gets killed, right? And if you can be shot from across the board by a sniper, that's actually very easy to do. But let's say that you're in a sealed room on one flank, and that was the last model on that flank, well, there's no way that they can get to them, right? And so suddenly you go, boom, instant TVP. And it can be anywhere, right? Like they could whiff and they charge you in your deployment zone, and you just go, boom, on Ransack, away you go. And also the range as well. Like it's hard. It's harder for there to be more models in range. So it's boom, suddenly you get it. So that's one example. But yeah, I think Seek and Destroy probably is the better option. Route going through the floor, like through walls, means it's not too bad to score, I guess. And I guess things like things like security is probably stronger because you know that there's more steps to get the distance, right? Like it's still significantly harder for your opponent to come all the way across the board or sit on the center line because they have to commit more. So yeah, I think you're probably right. I would probably put Seek and Destroy at the top, then Recon, then Security, then Infiltrate. But maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on Infiltrate and stuff. I need to have a think about it. Maybe we need to do a ITD TACOP tier list.
Yeah.
We can do that.
All right. Let's move on to the next question then. How do you deal with teams that have a range advantage over you? For example, I play Nurgle Legionary, and I struggle when playing against teams with a greater charge range, etc.
Okay, yeah, so this is a really common problem. So, like, I mean, perfect example. Let's say you're the local legionary player, and you're playing against all the intercession boys, and they're all moving 7 inches, and you're only moving 6, and you feel a little bit outranged. So this is very, very common. Okay, so generically, this all comes down to positioning. All right, so you're going to have to accept, if you're the slower team, more risk to be in a good situation. But a lot of this you can do like ahead of time, right? So let's say you move your model and you want to move them onto an objective. Well, you need to map out, like, let you see where your opponent has placed their barricade or where the nearest heavy terrain is or something like that. You want to look and position your model so that you can reach that if they're in cover. So an example might be, like, you know that they have to be within 1 inch of heavy terrain, right? And so you see that the heavy terrain is a certain distance away from you. So you move and dash and you position so that you can get to within 2 inches of 1 inch within that heavy cover. Does that make sense? So that if they're in the cover, you can get within 2 inches of them. If they step back a bit and they're now 1.1 inch away from cover, you don't care because they're not in cover and you can shoot them anyway. All right, so like that's kind of like the sweet spot where you have to like pre-measure these things and you go, where it's a bit of prediction, right? Where is my opponent going to be, and I'm going to move there. Now, a great way of doing that generically on your turn 1 and turn 2, which is where this really comes in, right? Is the objectives. Okay, so like if your opponent isn't on the objective, then it doesn't matter what they're doing, effectively. Like, if they just don't go onto the objectives until turn 4, then you probably won the game on points, and who cares, right? Like, if you're sitting on all 4 objectives, turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3, and they've only got 2 points each turn, and you score it, like, it's game over. So, I think what you want to do is, when you're positioning your models on turn 1, is you want to position them so that they can threaten that whole objective, right? So let's say you're a shooting model. You want to be able to move up 6 inches so that you're on the objective and covering whatever cover they have. So you have an 8-inch threat range if you want to be able to do a move and shoot. Or if let's say you have a plasma gun, well, you can go, all right, well, actually what I can do is I can move and dash 9 and then have a 2-inch threat range 11. So I can sit 11 inches away from their barricade, wherever it is. But again, noting that they can sit 0.984 back from the barricade. So make sure that you measure from that range, not from the front of the barricade. So measure from them being within 1 inch of the barricade, measure back your 11 inches and position your model there, right? So like that's where you go, this is where I need to position based on where they're likely going to be. With charges, same thing, right? But you know that it's a 9-inch range, so you have to be closer. So that's kind of what I would be looking at doing, and I'll go, okay, right. So I need to be able to move up to this location to be able to threaten this. The next thing I would say is if you have a model that's like floating and you don't really necessarily have a specific place to put them, I would try and put them so that they're in range of multiple objectives. So that might be that they're within 6 inches of one, and like you can be 5.99 inches away, right? That is fine. That's within range. You just want to be able to get a toe on an objective. And if they're 5.99 inches away from one objective and they're 5.99 inches away from the other objective, that means that singular model can now swing to either of those, depending on where you need them, to play the mission primary. And that's really, really big. So I think you have to look at like those sorts of placements as well. It might be that you go, all right, well, actually, this model is going to be using a move and a dash to get to this objective. So maybe they're 8.99 away from one objective and 5.99 away from two others. That's like an ideal position for a model to be in, because it's like, cool, I can move and dash to this place. I can move to this one. I can move to this one. I'm covering 3 objectives with one model, and that's how you get elites getting value. All right. So the difficulty will always be your opponent gets to move after you, and sometimes it just means you have to suck it up and position closer with your elite models than you necessarily want to. And that might mean that you take some more heat on Turning Point 1. But what I'd say is, like, if you're playing Nurgle Legionary, you've got some of the toughest models to remove Turning Point 1. If you've got your champion with a trophy, if they get within 3 inches of you, -1 attacks, you're 13 wounds, like, even an overcharging plasma cannon, a plasma gun doesn't kill you, right? Like with Mutagenate Flesh Up, that is huge. You got the Anointed that's going to be sitting somewhere in the mid board. You got Shrive Talent that fights first in melee. So like you can send these models into the mid board and be relatively happy with where they are. And then, as I said, position your other models 5.99 back from the objective, or in threat range of the cover on the other side, and boom, suddenly you've got that, and you've got what you need going forwards. And if your opponent doesn't move within threat range of your models in the mid board, happy days. You can just pass. You can just chill, right? Like you're scoring the primary, they're not. Like it's fine. And then you've got your counter punch ready to go afterwards. So that's generically what I'd probably say about that. Do you think that covers it, Connor? Do you reckon there's anything else that you think is worth throwing in there from ideas?
Absolutely. No, I think you've done a good job there. I think also, just to add, just the idea of non-reciprocal shooting as well. Like, so they might have a longer range over you. Say it's like a shooting model. Doesn't matter. They might actually have to get to a much closer angle to actually get the shot on you. So it doesn't matter that they've got infinite range or whatever. They have to move around. Same with non-reciprocal charges. They might have an extra inch, but if you're just at the back of a barricade, they need 2 inches to climb over it and assault you. So just consider that non-reciprocal idea as well when you're positioning. I think positioning in this scenario is key, as you've just gone through there.
Yeah. And I think the thing to have in the back of your mind is, where are the objectives, right? Like when I'm placing this model, are they in range of an objective, or are they just sitting are they just hanging in the wind? Because if you're just generically putting them somewhere where they're doing nothing, well, that's not particularly helpful. But like, can they reach an objective? Now, I'm not. I should caveat. I'm not saying you just sit a guy in the open so that they're like in range of all these objectives and they just get shot to death. Not what I'm saying at all, right? But what I'm saying is like that you can generally find positions where you go, actually, if I go here, this model can threaten this objective or these 2 objectives, and that's really, really useful. And then I guess on Turning Point 2 onwards, you can start looking at where can you position and start threatening their objectives as well. Because if you move dash and tap their objective in their territory, well, they've got to deal with that now, and now they're not dealing with the mid-board objective. So that's what I'd say on that one.
Cool. Let's move on to the next question. What skills make a good kill team player? Are there any other transferable skills from other board games?
Okay. I'm sure there are transferable skills from other board games. So I think the main thing that so I'm going to answer this a bit more like ethereally. Like I'm going to go through the process that I think people do when they they start kill team and how they sort of go through the game, right? So when you're a beginner at kill team, your core focus is on learning the core rules, and that's really where you're at. And then you start to learn your own team's rules, right? So like when you're absolute beginner, you're just focusing on how do I play the game. When you start becoming a more casual player, you go, all right, I now know how to play the game, and I'm learning my team's rules, and I'm making sure that I get all those right. And I now understand roughly what like how I can win and how I can use my team's abilities to win the game. And that's kind of where you're at when you're a casual player. When you start getting to the competitive level, that's where really you start changing from I know my team's abilities to, I know my team's synergies. I know what my tac ops are. I know when to flex them. I now know like the nuance of the equipment that I'm going to pick. And I'm getting quite like proficient at it, and I really know what the win condition is. So I'm not just going to score points like willy nilly, but I'm actually looking at okay, I know what's going to maximize my score this game, and it's like and it's that focusing on VP, Vice, killing models or anything like that to really start focusing on the win. So it's like I now understand what wins me the game, and I'm going to make sure that I do well on my tac ops to achieve that. I'm going to use my rules effectively to do that, and I'm going to really be good at scoring the primary. And I think when you start to get to the tournament winning stage is when you take it to the next level, which is your opponent's rules as well as your own, and their abilities, and their tac ops. And the next step beyond you maximizing your own points is learning how to deny your opponents, right? So as soon as you can start going, okay, well, I'm playing against this particular faction, so I know these are the tac ops that they would like to be able to do. This is how I think they're going to try and score them. And actually, I need to be able to do something on turn one so that I can deny them that. So maybe it's something like recover item. You need to have a model that you think is going to be able to move into the mid board and with 3 APL contest their recover item turn one. So they have to commit more than they want to be able to get that point. Or maybe it's, I don't know, you're playing security or a team that has security playing against Vet Guard, and you go, you know what, I need to make sure that I move enough models forward so that I can get into the center if they play central control, or onto the center line to be able to do that, or to threaten their escort operative or whatever it's going to be. And then the next one after that is like learning their synergies and then understanding what their priority threats are, right? So like being able to go, let's say you're playing against Vet Guard and you go, right, I need to kill that demo guy, right? Like that guy is the threat, or understanding exactly what their threat range is and being able to play around that and going, right, at the end of turning point one, I now know what your team's rules are, and I can prioritize who I'm going to kill in which order to minimize your ability to do damage to me, maximize my VP, and minimize your VP. And that's like the next step. So that, I think, what makes a good kill team player is like rules knowledge. And that comes from a growth of core rules, team rules, and then enemy rules, right? And I think that's kind of like the process of growth that you go through. And the hardest players that you play against are the ones that know your team and you don't have to explain to them, right? There is no gotchas because they go, oh, that's the endurance that you have, right? And he's got relentless or whatever. And you go, yeah. And they know your rules just as well as you do. They know your ploys, right? That you're playing blooded and they go, oh, right, you're going to try and suicide your guy next to your leader to stop your leader dying. So I'm not going to take Headhunter in this matchup because I don't think it's worth, whatever it's going to be, right? So you know what they can do to be able to play around it. And then I think, focusing on that win condition is the next bit, and understanding categorically what's going to win you the game, right? And I take it to the next step as well. So it's not just how do I max those points or how do I reduce my opponent's points to the minimum, but like in each decision, it's understanding which creates the biggest delta, right? So like my model has these, 3 options. One of them gives me 1 point. One of them denies you 1 point. And option 3 gives me gives me 1 and denies you 1, whatever it's going to be. And understanding in that moment where you go, oh, actually, I'm going to take that option because it's going to deny you a point, and maybe the other point that I can score, I can get that back on another turn, or wherever it's going to be. Like, there's another option to do that one. And it's understanding immediately in that moment where you can go, let's say it's a difference between a tack op or a primary. I can make that tack op point up next turn, but I can't make up that primary point next turn. That primary point is gone, right? And not only is it gone for me to gain, but it's you've already got it, and I can't take that away from you. So it's being able to identify those things in that exact moment and being able to switch them. The next thing I want to say is risk management, right? So like this inherently is a game of probabilities. It's a game of risks, and it's a game of understanding like when to take them and when not to. All right. So a great example, let's say you're playing against like Hand of the Archon. All right. They're a really interesting team because they're a momentum team, right? They can run away with it. So actually Hand of the Archon somewhat rewards you for playing high risk early, right? So like if your opponent understands that and they meet you with that and you both take high risk, well, actually that can really hurt them early on, and suddenly boom, they're out of the game because they lost too many models turning point 1 or turning point 2, and it's irrecoverable for them. But if you let them run away with it because you play a really low risk game, then suddenly they pick up the pace, pick up momentum. Before you know it, they're in a winning condition quite early on. So I think it's about understanding that, and understanding that it's very dynamic. So it's not just like every game, don't take any risk turning point 1, take maximum risk turning point 4. That's not necessarily true, right? Like there are certain games where you have to, again, looking back on that win condition, identify where you might no longer be winning, and you might need to identify that midway through turning point 2 and go, unless I take significantly more risk now, then I'm going to lose this game by, even if it's by 1 point, then it's already a done game. So I suddenly need to start taking more risks. So if your opponent gets really hot with their dice, maybe you need to start again applying more risk to be able to make up for it, or vice versa. Maybe you can say, actually, this is where I need to take less risk because I've got the points I need to on this turn, and I've got the secondaries I need to on this turn. And actually, by slow playing this and taking very low risk, I can actually now, get what I need to at the end of it. So understanding that risk management, understanding probabilities is going to really help you. And I say definitely use the kill team calculator, right? So like for the key things that you're doing, use the maths on it and understand what the key differences are. Because you can go away from it and go, all right, I've done the maths, and I know that if I do 2 rounds of shooting, I should kill you. 1 round of shooting is going to injure you, whatever it's going to be. Or I'm expecting this much damage. All right, so then you're not too at the time, like you're not too triggered by it, where suddenly you go, oh, this has gone massively wrong, because you go, actually, it was only a 40% chance to kill anyway. So I understand the risk I'm doing, and I understand the likely outcome of the results of me rolling the dice before they happen. And finally, this one I'm going to steal from Vanguard Tactics because I really like it. And it's a very succinct way of saying what I want to say. But it's trade CP for VP. All right, so that's one of their things is like when you're spending those CP, you only have 7 per game. There might be a way for you to get more based on your kill team, but generically you only have 7 per game. Every time you spend them, you have to be really thinking about what is it that what is it you're spending on, right? And is that actually helping you achieve what you need to do for the game? So have a rough idea of your budget and understand that what that CP reroll is actually costing you, rather than just rolling through it. Because if that CP is unlocking a stratagem that you need to fundamentally score a tack op or whatever it's going to be in a subsequent turn, and you've burnt it, well then you're in a massive, like, you're in the hurt locker, right? Like you can't come back from that. Or maybe it's like you can go, I'm playing Seek and Destroy, so me getting rerolls on my attack dice is really important. and I need that to be able to achieve my secondaries, and therefore it's a good investment. Or maybe it's like I'm playing security and my game plan is just to target this team and not lose models until later on. Well, I'm going to spend on defensive rerolls, whatever it's going to be. And so I think that's a good way of doing it. So trading CP for VP. And the final point, is just adaptability. I think once you know what your opponent can do, you know your own team, you understand the probability of your actions, you're focused on the mission, you're focused on the win conditions. It's just being able to constantly look at what's going on the table and go, oh, you know what, my original game plan has gone wrong for whatever reason. My opponents predicted it and they've done this. So I'm going to do this now. I'm going to mix it up to be able to change it. I think those are a bit ethereal, but hopefully there's some tangible stuff from that. Like if you're out there practicing and trying to figure on it, what you want to do, I think I would try and do that. So my advice would be read the rules as much as you can, not just for your own kill team, but for your opponent's kill teams. Understand what they can do. Use the kill team calculator as best as you can. Read the tac ops, not just the ones you want to use, but your ones your opponents use. And then be strict to yourself when you want to spend that CP. Maybe budget before you get to the table, and then be adaptable. Don't just stick to a singular game plan because that's all you've ever done. But don't be afraid to adapt because your opponent's probably seeing it coming if it's a standard meta play. Any thoughts on that one, Connor?
No, that's good. I think you nailed it. Right, let's jump into the next question. What are your thoughts on proxying for teams which are not yet released yet? E.g., I've just bought some Khorne Berserkers and I want to play them as Felgor Ravagers.
So I absolutely love it. So I think you got to find a team that matches your flavor, matches your vibe, where it's going to be, and enjoy it, right? So in my mind, Khorne Berserkers as Felgor Ravagers is like the perfect combo, right? Like they're a bunch of dudes that are melee focused, and you can have some really good fun kit bashing them. I think there are some key fundamentals that when you're proxying, like you need to follow. So the absolute must is base size must be the same, because in kill team, base size makes an absolutely like humongous difference. It affects non-reciprocal shooting, it affects melee positioning, it affects charge blocking. Like it changes so much. If you turn up with a 40mm base, your ability to be on an objective and be in melee with someone, like it's completely different. So your base size must be the same, right? So, which is fine. And I think, like, for instance, in this instance, Khorne Berserkers are on 32s anyway. Perfect. So away you go, right? So first things first, make sure your base size are the same, and then no one's going to have any major issues. Next thing is make sure the model size is as close as possible. So if your guys are a bit shorter than the original model, well, just bump up the base a little bit, right? If they're a bit bigger, then that's actually probably a disadvantage to you in this instance because you're a melee person. But like if you have a higher head or whatever it's going to be, then make sure it's not too ridiculous or anything like that, and you should be fine. But like those are the two, I guess, like most important things. The next thing I would say is that make it so the models are as easy as possible for your opponent to understand which model they are, right? Like if it's difficult for your opponent to look at it and go, oh, I don't know who this guy is. And you've got a guy that's got a chain axe and a bolt pistol, but you say that it's your heavy bolter dude. Like that's rough, right? Or, you go, oh, actually the guy that's got the one ear that's spiky out and the other one's not is the plasma guy. I know he looks like a chainsaw, but trust me, he is. Like that sort of stuff probably isn't going to float at any sort of tournament. But I think if you turn up and say, hey, I've got like this really cool Khorne Berserker team, and they're kitted out with the right war gear. So you've given like the guy that has the huge mace, like a big mace. You've given the guy that's got the two big claws, well, you've given him like some demon claws or something. The guy that's got the grenade, the Toxhorn, you've given him a grenade. Like people are going to love that. They're going to get so excited about it, right? And perfect example, like, you go to the Not Kill Team group. They've got some fantastic kit bashes. Like Chris has got his Blooded Kill Team. He's taken like individual Imperial models. So he's got like a Sister of Battle, he's got a Navy Breacher, he's got a Vet Guard, he's got a Kazakin, etc., etc. And he's made each of these models into various like blooded models, right? But Nurgle versions. Look incredible. Johnny's got his novitiates, and they're all, again, they're like they're kit bashed and they're from various different kits, But when you look at it, you go, oh, that is obviously that model. I think he's got like a Callous Assassin with the crossbow as the what's she called? Whatever the crossbow girl is in novitiates. But you look at it and you go, oh, the girl with the crossbow is the girl with the crossbow, right? Like that's a good level of proxying, I think, and that's really like that's the thing that's going to get people excited to play with you and interact with you, and they're going to be excited to learn about your models and why you've built them in a certain way. Maybe you have a particular affinity to Khorne. I don't know who that could be, but like maybe they are, but you don't want to play Beastmen. That's a perfect proxy. I'm aware, by the way, Connor, that I'm talking to you because you have just put this question in here, right? This is you, right? but those are the main points. So make sure it has the same base size. Make sure the model is approximately the same dimensions. If you're ever in doubt, always model for disadvantage. All right. So let's say your opponent thinks that your model shouldn't be able to get visibility because you've given him 8 heads and he should only have 1. Well, then you rule in the sense that, well, you have a cool model on the table, but yeah, like at the end of the day, you have deviated from the norm, and therefore your opponent should get the benefit of that, right? So that's what I would go with, and make sure that they're recognizable. So when you look at it, you go, "Oh, that's what it is." And if you have gone for something that's been particularly out there, then maybe you can label the bases, or you can bring data cards with the pictures of the models that you have on them and give them to your opponent at the start, right? And you can go, "Hey, here's my legionary team. They don't look very conventional. So what I've done is I've got a picture that shows the model and all the rules beneath them. I'm going to put them in front of you so you have access to my rules and you're never going to get confused." And that's maybe a way around it. But that's probably what I would say. I'm like, I don't think... I was going to say, I don't think anyone has a problem with proxying. There are probably some people out there that do. I think if you follow those key rules, people aren't going to mind. That they're generically, people are going to be excited about the hobby aspect, and they're going to be excited to play with you and learn more about your team. So long as you do those, if you turn up with a 25mm base for your Custodes, and it's actually based on a grot, and you say that I can't see him because he's hiding behind a barricade, then I'm probably going to call you out. Like that's the way it is. But if you turn up with someone that's also on a 40mm base, but is like, what was the one that we had previously? It was the guys that had the Custody Orcs. Did you see those, Connor, on Instagram and Discord? And it was a while back. They turned up to some of the London tournaments. Do you ever see them? The what do they call them?
But I have seen some phenomenal orc kit bashes. And
Custorks?
No, they weren't Custodians on I saw, but I have seen some. Like, orcs are just a great thing to use some imagination and convert anything with, I think. But yeah. No, I didn't see these Custodes. But
long story short, right? He had a bunch of I guess it was like maybe they're based on Meganobs. I'm not really too sure what they're based on, but they're 40mm like bases. They're orcs. They're the same size. They're easily recognizable. But it's playing as Custodes, right? And it's like, I loved it. Like you remember Sean Gorman and his like Pathfinder?
Yes, they're the orcs I was thinking
Vet
of.
Guard, right? They were
not the Imperial Guard ones. No, I was thinking of someone playing Pathies as orcs. But yeah.
Yeah, well, he had the Vet Guard rules, but he was using Tau models, and they look so cool, like so cool. So anyway, slightly off topic, but my point being is, if they're on the right size base and they're easily distinguishable as to what they are, no one is going to care. And like Sean did a perfect thing. Like he had like he printed out all of the rules and made them all, like every single one, for his Tau faction, so you could see that it was like really obvious, and he could lend you the rules and be like, hey, look at these. this is what it is. So that's like the best way of doing it, I think. And so there has been some fantastic kit bashes in the community. I don't see anyone having any issues. I think go for it, like, but just make it as on the same base, as close to size as possible. No one's going to mind.
Cool. Next question. I'm a new player and I want to improve as fast as possible. What advice do you have? I believe that practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent.
This is a really good question. So it's a difficult one because I'm sort of going to go back to my military experience or whatever. So I think it's all in the debrief. But the problem with that is you sometimes need someone who understands like the game and understands how it could be done better to make the recommendations, right? So I think that's probably where you have to go to the tournaments. You have to go to the good players, and I think this is where we talked about this before. The more good players you play against, the better you become. Right? That's just kind of like the fundamental rules of the game. And the reason why that is because they show you stuff that you wouldn't have thought about before. And when you finish the game, you can ask them objective questions about your performance. So I think it's really important to go into these things without any ego. It's like it's perfectly valid for you to turn up to a tournament expecting to win nothing, but learn everything. Be like, I'm going to learn about how my team plays, but I'm also going to be looking at how my opponent chooses barricades and all that sort of stuff. And you can ask them at the time, and they can choose to tell you or not. Some of them might not tell you because they might have a tactic behind why they don't want to tell you. But you can be like, oh, you placed your barricade there. Do you mind if I ask, like, why? Or you can say if it's not too much, or if it's a big issue now, I'll save it to the end. And when we go for a beer in the pub afterwards, you can explain to me what your logic was and why you did that. So I think surrounding yourself with good players is the way to do it. I think the way you do that is you go to tournaments. So you get lots of games in very quickly against good players, and you spend your time in the margins talking to those good players. Because, like, let's say you go to, you're quite exceptional, kind of, you managed to get three games in a single club night, but most people get 2 in, right? But a lot of people just get 1 in. And maybe you only play once a week, so you're getting 1 game a week. Well, going to a tournament and playing 4 games in a day, that's like so much more like compound learning so quickly. And then if you're asking your opponent after each game, effective questions, what do you think I did well with in that game? Oh, I think you did this. That was really good. What do you think I did badly? Like, oh, I think actually you could have done this, or phrase it in ways that make it so your opponent doesn't feel bad telling you. So, like, maybe phrase it in a way where you go, "Hey, do you think there's anything that I could have done slightly better that game, or do you think there's a way that I could have scored more points that you saw?" And then they can say it in a way where they don't feel awkward saying, like, if you ask them, why do you think I'm so terrible at this game? Then, like, most like people with emotional skills or emotional intellect aren't going to say anything too mean to you. So they might not want to answer. But if you say it in a way of like, hey, I think that was that game was pretty close, or maybe it wasn't as close as I liked it to be. Is there any way that you think I could have maybe got that game to be a little bit closer? Is probably how to do it. So asking those effective questions to your opponents to try and learn from them, and playing against those really good opponents is how you get better at the game. I think a lot of people try and dodge the hard matchup sometimes. They might look at it and they go, oh, that player in my group is a really good player, and I don't want to play them because I'm scared of losing, or I'm worried that I'm not going to give them a good game. Well, it's like, well, I don't know, just like completely 180 it. Just if it's a casual game, especially, start playing them and then go ask some questions throughout. Why have you done that? And they can explain it, and you can say things like, well, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Especially if it's like a coaching casual game. But do you think there's something that's better? Like, is there anything that you're looking at right now on the board that you're really scared that I'm going to do? And you can still do, like, I'm going to lock in this option. Like, this is the option that I have chosen. But right now, based on the board state, was there something that you would do differently? So, like, if you can actively do that during a game, that's really good. And then if you can't actively do that during a game, then you've got to do it in the debrief, right? So that's where you ask the effective questions. And if you can have a really good opponent like lead you through that debrief process, I think you can get maximum learning from it, because that's kind of what you want to be able to do. And there's a whole bunch of like core instructional techniques that are available on Google, which you can look at. And if you are a particularly good like player in your local scene, like go have a look and see how you can impart these things on your friends, all that sort of stuff, because like you're only going to get better by bringing them up as well, right? So if they keep giving you better games because you've made them better, well, then you're going to then learn more because you're going to play harder opponents, etc., etc. And I think that's what it's all about. So I think you're right. You don't just want to play lots of games. You want to play games against a variety of teams, against a variety of opponents. Best way of doing that is tournaments. And then when you're there, you want to surround yourself with those people and ask those questions. Like, tournaments is a fantastic time to socialize. Everyone loves this game. Everyone loves talking about this game. Like, go and speak to people, and be like, and understand what they did well and all that sort of stuff. And then get on the Discords and read through what people's thoughts are. And take all of it with a grain of salt, like some people are biased, and like, let's say that they absolutely love Legionary, that they might tell you that Legionary is the best thing ever and that you should always play Khorne. But obviously we know, Connor, don't we, that Khorne isn't always the answer, and that actually Nurgle is probably the better choice.
Okay, well, yeah, if you're playing competitively, but yeah. Khorne approves, I think, because Nurgle is the most violent, I think, so everyone wins. All right, just conscious of the clock there, so let's try and squeeze one more in. Next question. Looking at just Hunter Clade specifically, what is the optimal way of building a roster for take-all-comers, specifically tournaments?
Okay, great. So this is a question from a Patreon that's after some unique advice focusing around Hunter Clade. Now, it's been a little while since I've played Hunter Clade, but I've got a bit of experience, but I'm going to kind of lean on what a lot of other people do as well. So I think they've correctly identified that actually Hunter Clade is one of those teams that roster choice is quite important, because you can't fit everything that you want on it, right? So you can't have the Rust Stalkers with all the options and the Infiltrators with all the options and all the leader options, and all, you just can't do it. You run out of space. Personally, the way I like to play Hunter Clade is I like to lean heavily one way or the other. So when it comes to the Sicarians, you have the Rust Stalkers that are really good in melee, and they're quite good at like achieving double kills, and they ignore the traverse penalty and that sort of stuff. They can move up the board quite fast. Or you have the Infiltrators, which are better at turning off rerolls and sort of like slow playing your enemy a little bit. So I think there's certain matchups where you want each one. I think you just have to go, okay, I mean, I personally think you just take 5 of each. I think probably some more players might say you could probably run it down to like 3 Infiltrators, and knowing that you're always going to take 2 Rust Stalkers maybe. But like, I think for CP efficiency and all that sort of stuff, you want to try and maximize where you can. I think you just take 5 of each. I think you always take the ceaseless stud carbines. The damage difference really isn't that much difference on the flechette launcher, and the range reduction you get on the Infiltrators is really frustrating. So having that infinite range is just so useful. So I think you just give 5 power weapon stud carbine Infiltrators on your roster if you want to lean fully into that. And then I think probably you run 5 Rust Stalkers with Rending. And the reason I say this is because there's a lot of matchups where the Rending is critical for your ability to kill models. And I think you need to, like, more so than the balanced. And so I think you run it that way, and you take the fight twice ability, and you take the balanced inherent in the team in melee when you need it. I think that's probably how you run it. So that then gives you options that if you do that, you then have enough options on the rest of the roster to be able to fill out every other option that you need. And note that I think generically you take the vanguards with the exception of the gunners for the order flip on TP1, whatever it is. But generically, you just the leader, you only take vanguard, you don't take ranger, right? But that then lets you have all the options you need. So I think that's probably how I would try and skin it. It is a difficult team to play because of that reason. I don't think I've mastered it, and the meta definitely has changed. But I think the way you've got to build it is I'd almost look at the key matchups or the most common matchups based on meta that you think you're going to take, and ask yourself what Ruststalkers what's Sicarians am I taking in this battle? And if the answer is that like 80% of the things you're taking, let's say the Cord Claw and Transonic Razor for the balance on Ruststalkers, well then maybe you take that. But if you're going, actually what I really need to take is the Transonic Blades because I need the rending because I'm playing against commandos, and if I don't get 2 crits, then they're going to just a scratch the first one, and I'm not going to be able to kill them, right? Because 4/5 isn't enough. And if I take the infiltrators, I'm probably not going to get enough damage through with just 4 attacks. So actually, I need to fight twice. I need 4/6 rending, and rolling 6 dice with a reroll is enough to guarantee a rending or to make it likely. It's probably how I try and skin it. Is that? So I think you take 5 and 5, and you just lean hard into one play style and go, right, this is what I'm going to go with, and it's going to work in most of the instances. And then as you start playing tournaments a bit more, you might go, actually, I'm going to maybe drop down to just 3 infiltrators, and that's going to give me an option for 2 more roster slots to maybe have a bit of flex in the Ruststalker loadout potentially. Is probably what I would do. Other changes that have happened is, I guess now the Arquebus is less valuable, so you can maybe drop him now, which I hadn't thought about until just now. Now that would give you another roster slot or 2, I guess. So I have more think on the Arquebus, but that's my gut feeling. But let's chat about it in the Discord as well. Drop me an @ and we'll see what we can think about. Hopefully that answers that one, Connor.
Yeah, gleaming. Thanks.
Is that all our questions for today?
We've done all. Yeah, that's the last one.
Absolutely ideal. All right, well, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. So hopefully you found something new or useful while listening. And if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. Once again, a quick reminder, 25th, 26th of November, we have our tournament down in Darksphere in London. Potential games on the Friday night as well on the 24th. So pencil in that date. Make sure you're available. Get the pink slips in with the various partners that you have out there. That sounded odd. Your partner, maybe. And book that date in before we get into it too bizarre. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. That really is a great way to help a small channel like ours by watching our episodes straight to the end. And if you can't wait and you want early access, as we said, we do have a Patreon where you get exclusive access to all of our content ahead of time. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.